Good evening, everybody, and welcome along to this edition of Heroes and Icons with myself, Pat Berry, on Lyre Media. This is a series where we look at different heroes and icons of the 19th and 20th century. And we just give you an outline, a brief thumbnail of their lives and times. That's all we can do, really, and hope that we'll inspire you to read more about the time they lived in, what they got up to, and how they lived their lives, etc. And as I said, this is series 2, episode 5. And the subject of this particular episode is the man behind us there, is Wyatt Berry Earp, to give him his proper name. That's Wyatt Berry Earp, because we all know him as Wyatt Earp. He is a handsome man indeed. He was born in 1848 and he passed away in 1929, which in itself straddled both the 19th and 20th centuries. So there you go, he's a very famous, iconic figure of America. Indeed, worldwide fame really, came to him early on, Anyway, we have an email for the program, which is info@lyremedia.tv. And if you want to make any suggestions or comments on the program, or suggestions for future programs, or if you want to deliver one yourself, you're more than welcome to come in here to our studio here in Limerick and deliver your own tone on whatever figure you might find that people would find interesting, if you follow my drift. Anyway, as I said, now there's a lot of information around. When I was looking at making, I suppose, plans for this program, there's an awful lot of information around on Wyatt Earp and his extended family as well. Now, obviously, you have to discern, you have to try and work out what is fact and fiction. And at this remove from him, obviously, that's not an easy thing to do. But all you can do is rely on reliable witnesses to certain events in his life, and also evidence from things that were recorded by his friends and family about Wyatt himself, his demeanor, and what kind of character he was himself. Now, looking across the different descriptions of him by different people who knew him well, people who just came across him, people who knew him in different guises as a saloon, or whatever job he may have had at the time, they all agreed. I think there's a strand going through the description of how they described him, if you for the want of a better description, was they all agreed that he was soft-spoken with nerves of steel. He, I suppose, survived countless gunfights, and due to his extraordinary patience and resolute manner. Now, obviously, to survive a gunfight, I don't know how I'd cope myself with being a live gun that's about to kill you and you're trying to draw your gun as well. You would really need to be nerveless, as they say, nerves of steel, you described, and patient as well, fearless, and he had all those qualities indeed to survive for so long. And in the lifetimes that he grew up in, well, obviously, during that time in America, of course, I mean, obviously, there was the Civil War during his lifetime, which was an extraordinarily appalling event in the history of America. And many of you, I'm sure, have watched Ken Burns' excellent program, excellent series on the Civil War in America, which was just generations of people, of primarily young men, totally and utterly wiped out. There was one county in one state where all 763 men went into battle and not one came back. And that was replicated many times throughout the United States. So it's the bloodiest war ever fought on American soil, one many historians would agree on. But anyway, that, of course, would have a profound effect on the life and times of people who lived through it and lived that time as well. And so after the Civil War in America in 1865, there was a huge upswell of healing and trying to get on and pick up their shattered lives and the economy and all of that. And then there's a gradual huge movement. The country was united then, obviously, as the United States of America. And into that milieu came the Earp family and many more families like them. Now, obviously, Wyatt Earp, as I said, he was born Wyatt Berry Earp. He was born in 1848 in Monmouth, Illinois. That's where he was born. And he was the third of 5 sons. Obviously, there was 2 older than him. How did I guess that? And he was born to Nicholas and Virginia and Earp, his mum and dad. And he spent his early life, formative years, as what you could say, in Illinois, and moved across to Iowa as well. And as a young teenager, Wyatt himself repeatedly tried to run away and join his brothers, James and Virgil, and his half-brother, Newton, as well, who fought for the Union during the Civil War. So anyway, each time he was caught and he was forced to go back home, because obviously he wasn't 1848, and he was quite too young, really, you know. Anyway, at the age of 17, he eventually left his home and he found work hauling freight and grading track for the Union Pacific Railroad. His family, his father, they had moved to Lamar in Missouri at that time. So in 1869, Wyatt went down and he became the local constable, because his father had resigned and he got the call. So he went into that position in 1869. Now, obviously, in the following year, then, when he had a secure job then, really, and standing in the community and all of that, and he was just 21 at the time, and he married Urilla Sutherland, and very much in love with her from all accounts, but she died in less than a year into their marriage from typhoid. And at that, prior to getting married, they had built and they had bought a house, and they had a little bit of land with it as well. And I mean, he was settled, if you like, in one way at that time, to the young age to be settled, but he was settled with his young wife and house and I said a job as well. So anyway, she died of typhoid within the year. This event in Wyatt Earp's young life, no doubt, had a devastating effect on him. And really, now in some of the films that you'll see on the life and times of Wyatt Earp, you'll see some of the films, obviously they take poetic license in some of them. You see him burning down the home and leaving everything behind afterward. But I don't think it happened that way from the accounts I was reading. Anyway, he sold his new house and left town to move around the Indian Territory and Kansas. And during this period of his life, which was turbulent enough, it took him a while to recover from it. He frequented saloons because he had some money, he had quite a bit of money saved up. And so he got into gambling and visited all the usual brothels and everything else that was around the place at the time. And he had several run-ins with the law enforcement, because if you're drinking a lot and you're gambling a lot and you carry on, you're bound to get into trouble, isn't it? It's the age-old problem. It's not confined to any one species of individual. It's a worldwide phenomenon. If you drink too much, you'll get into fights and trouble, and there you go. And that would be the least of his troubles anyway. He helped a police officer when he was in Wichita to track down a well-known wagon thief. And Earp eventually joined that city's police force during 1875 and 1876. And he later became the deputy town marshal of Dodge City. And of course, it was in Dodge City that Earp would make the acquaintance of one person who was, I suppose, figured a lot in his life then, which was Doc Holliday, a well-known gambler and carouser and all of that. But Doc Holliday was, I suppose, he had a short temper. Obviously, he was drinking a lot, but he was also battling consumption, which we would know as TB today. Now, in 1879, Wyatt Earp and his longtime companion, she was a former prostitute, Mattie Blaylock, they left Dodge City for Tombstone in Arizona. Now, obviously, the town was booming because they had been just beside in Tombstone, just not far from Tombstone, where the town sprung up, there was a huge silver find, and of course it brought in an awful lot of extra business and prospectors and every type of character you like, if you like, into Tombstone, and as the silver rush, as it was referred to, and of course then most of Wyatt Earp's family had gathered there as well. In the meantime, that's Virgil and Morgan and them. And Virgil, in fact, was working as the town marshal of Tombstone at that time. And then he persuaded Wyatt to work alongside him. So in March 1881, in Tombstone, while pursuing a group of cowboys who had robbed the local stagecoach, Wyatt struck a deal with the local rancher at the time, a well-known rancher by the name of Ike Clanton. And where did we hear that name before? You've guessed it already. And Ike Clanton, they suspected, they knew really without having any actual proof, but they knew that he had ties with some of these people who were robbing stagecoaches up and down the place. So Wyatt struck a deal with the local rancher, Ike Clanton, that probably they'd leave him alone if you give him some information leading to the cowboys who carried out these crimes. And there was obviously reward money mentioned as well. But anyway, Clanton then had a second thoughts about this, and he was thinking to himself, well, I've got a good thing going here. I'm just paraphrasing now. So soon enough, he decided, no, I'm not on those people's side. That's the Earp brothers and whoever is with them. And so he soon turned against Wyatt Earp and his brothers, and they began issuing threats against them that they want to stay out of their way and to meet their demise, And of course, the feud between them escalated so much so it got very, very bitter. And finally, it exploded into violence on October the 26th, 1881, at the OK Corral, the famous gunfight at the OK Corral. Now, in the gunfight that happened in the OK Corral, historically speaking now, Virgil Morgan and Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday faced off against the Clanton gang. That's Ike Clanton and his brother Billy Clanton, together with Tom and Frank McLaury. And when the thing finished up, you had Morgan, Virgil, and Doc Holliday were wounded in the shootout, but they all survived, obviously. But Billy Clanton and the McLaury brothers were killed, and Wyatt Earp himself escaped without any injury, which is remarkable, really, because they were very close range when the firing happened, as you can see from some of the films that were made about it, But you can read the historical facts as well, which just gives the actual incident and facts. You're listening to Lure Media with myself, Pat Barry, and Heroes and Icons is the program here, and we're looking at it, and we have an email, info@luremedia.tv. If you want to make any suggestions for future programs. This is series 2, episode 5 in the series, our short series, be giving a thumbnail sketch of Heroes and Icons of the 19th and 20th century. And anyway, after the incident and the shootout at the OK Corral, Ike Clanton filed murder charges against the Earps and the Doc Holliday, and there was a trial held in November, and full-blown trial with witnesses, lots of witnesses called and all. But anyway, at the end of the trial, they decided there was no case to answer, no murder case to answer on behalf of the Earps, and so it was thrown out and they were found not guilty. Shortly after that, in December, Virgil Earp was shot, and he was very seriously wounded, and that was in December. And then the following March, in one of the saloons in Tombstone, Morgan Earp was ambushed, outside, and he was inside, and they fired a whole volley of shots in there, and Morgan wound up dead in the saloon. And after that, I suppose you don't want to draw any conclusions or be disparaging against any individual, but I think Wyatt Earp himself absolutely lost the plot. And himself and Doc and Mr. Moore decided They were going to hunt down and get all these people who they thought were involved in shooting Virgil and shooting Morgan dead. And there was an awful lot of people killed during that time by them. You can see, you can read up on it. And really, I don't think myself, when you look at the character of Wyatt Earp and when you look at his life, I don't think he was quite the same after those incidents and those events in Tombstone, and that led from that during his time. So I think at the time, I mean, what was he? He was, you know, in his late 30s at the time, edging up towards 40, which was a good age at that time, you know, when you consider the life expectancy of people. Anyway, after Tombstone, I suppose the legend of the OK Corral overtook him in many places he went. And really, I suppose, right throughout for the rest of his life, really, that was a seminal event that was etched in people's minds, you know. And I suppose the legend that we know as Wyatt Earp today, if you mention the word Wyatt Earp or the name Wyatt Earp to anybody, they will all mention the gunfight at the OK Corral, which only lasted all of, they say, for it to believe, anywhere between 90 seconds and 2 minutes. So there you go, that's a legend. And then eventually, anyway, he decided himself and his lifelong partner, Josephine Marcus, who was with him for over 40 years, they decided to leave Tombstone. And indeed, as I said, over the next 40 years, they moved around. I suppose they eventually settled in California, and but over the years he made his living then out of gambling, and he bought a saloon, and of course he was still interested in mining all his life, and he speculated in real estate as well. And I mean, by all accounts, he died a pretty wealthy man, you know. And he also worked as a personal secretary, a chap by the name of John H. Flood, who took down events of his own life, you know, with a view of writing his memoirs sometime. That's John H. Flood. And which received, I suppose, people were suspicious really that he might write something untrue or something about people they didn't want to. They were standoffish, I suppose they weren't cooperative, and he received a very poor reception during his lifetime. That's John H. Flood. Now, Wyatt Earp himself, eventually he died in Los Angeles in January 1929 at the age of 80, which was when you consider the man's life and what he did and what he throughout his life, I thought it was a fantastic achievement that he lived till 80 years of age. Now, the first major biography on the life of Wyatt Earp was titled Wyatt Earp, Frontier Marshal, by Stuart M. Lake, and it was published in 1931, 2 years, and became a bestseller, establishing Wyatt Earp as really a folk hero among millions of Americans. And of course, I mean, that was shortly after the Depression, so the people need diversions to take them away from the hardships and poverty. They were still suffering from the Wall Street crash of 1929. So when this came out, I mean, really, it became a bestseller. And through Lake, though Lake met with Earp himself near the end of his life, the man who wrote Wyatt Earp, Frontier Marshal, he later admitted, anyway, down the line, that many of the quotations he made up were made up about the frontiersman. Some of them weren't, but when he admitted that, then obviously it was very difficult to place credibility on the, I suppose, on his description of Wyatt Earp and how he lived his life. But now, getting back to that, before we finish up on this edition of Heroes and Icons, there were many films made on the life and times of Wyatt Earp. I suppose the first major one was directed by John Ford in 1946, which is My Darling Clementine, famous song, which starred Henry Fonda, the wonderful Linda Darnell, remember her now, God, and Victor Mature, a fabulous actor as well. Then, of course, we move on to 1957, appropriately enough titled The Gunfight at the OK Corral, which included Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas starring roles of that. Very well received as well. Then in 1993, there was Tombstone, which starred Kurt Russell as Wyatt Earp and Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday, which my favourite actor who played the character of Doc Holliday would be Val Kilmer. So that's my own personal opinion. It's a fine film. They're all fine films, actually. Then in 1994, Wyatt Earp came out, the title film, which starred Kevin Costner and Dennis Quaid and Gene Hackman. Yeah, Gene Hackman was in that as well. But going back into 1967, we had The Hour of the Gun. When you consider and all the top-class, top-notch actors that aspired to play him, well, it's a testament of the man himself, the figure, the esteem which he was held, I suppose you could say. James Garner, Jason Robards, and Albert Salmi appeared in that 1967 film. And of course, there was a 1971 film as well, titled Doc, which starred the wonderful Stacey Keach, Faye Dunaway, and John Collins. I mean, Stacey Keach, I love Stacey Keach in films. I did a fine actor, fine character actor. But that was our pen sketch of the life and times of Wyatt Earp, 1948 to 1929. And this edition of Heroes and Icons, Series 2, Episode 5, tell all your friends about us. And you can find all the programs up on our YouTube channel, Lyra Media TV. And so from this edition of Heroes and Icons, from myself, Pat Barry, until we meet again, take care and God bless.